Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel. And thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a follow-on, I guess, from the other video to some extent, where I'm talking about visa fraud. Now this, folks, is particularly on Australia, but it could apply to any Western country given the scale of mass migration. Now, whether the fraud occurs in fraudulently making an asylum claim or something else, or fraudulently claiming, claiming credentials or qualifications or something to be able to get into the first world country coming from a third world country, or whether it's bribing or whatever, it doesn't matter, but fraudulently gaining entry. But then once in the West, and I'm using Australia as an example here, once in the West, to then fraudulently engage in ghost college studies, as they're called, where they pretend to be studying at a college, but really they've just come to Australia to work, typically getting under the table type payments and things like that. But also overstaying visas, falsely claiming asylum when they're not. They're just arriving in the West to act as freeloaders and so on. And then look at the amount of prosecutions. Now, given the level of fraud, and yet the fraud can occur in other ways too, which is, I suppose, just as bad. But there are terms and conditions that are given on a visa. For example, if someone comes in as ostensibly as a student, they're allowed to work, for example, 10 hours a week, let's say. But instead, they're going to a ghost college and they're working 60, 70 hours a week doing DoorDash or whatever. There's some job where you're working in a takeout food shop that's owned by offshore Indian investors that just want to swing the cheap labor in, and there's all sorts of fraudulent documentation to do with skilled labor and qualifications and the supposed number of degrees they have and this sort of thing. So so there are scam labor hire colleges, there are scam immigration agents, and there are scam labor hire firms. Now, just in Australia alone, there are there are estimated to be over 2,000 of these scam institutions that are solely focused on bringing Indians and to a lesser extent Chinese into the West, or into Australia in this case. So the fraud is absolutely off the charts, and could be clamped down on hard. But there's a huge reluctance by the authorities to clamp down on. And I've noticed the difference that if a white person, say from, I don't know, white country, England or Ireland or something like that, overstays their visa, there are a surprising amount of resources the authorities have to find and locate and deport such a person. They'll make a serious effort. But when it's a brown or black person, nah, don't really care. They're just not into it. Not that they don't do anything at any time. And I witnessed an immigration department raid on it was a Chinese sort of, illegal immigration safe house or something you'd call it. It was a 2-bedroom apartment in an area that's notorious for a lot of Asians, Chinese, and there was a raid there, and there was mattresses. Like the day after the raid, there were mattresses stacked, or two stacks that were over 2 meters high, and they weren't the luxurious thick mattresses. They were fairly thin ones. So we're talking over 20 mattresses stacked up there in this place, and so it shows you how many people were living there. Now, these sort of places are just everywhere, and given the amount of Indians and Chinese, they're the two biggest blocks coming into Australia, who barely speak a lick of English, by the way, and they've obviously got no fucking qualifications. So the level of scam and fraud is huge. But there was a recent Senate hearing in Australia where there was a question: how many people last year were prosecuted for visa and related fraud? Now, I didn't get into the weeds of the numbers here, so I don't know if this is just straight out visa, people incorrectly or misleadingly, whatever, filling out their visa information. Is it that, or did it include all the ghost colleges and so on? the fraudulent labour hire firms and so on, which of course is huge and widespread. Now, according to the information, only four, I think it might have been 4 or 5 people, just 5 individuals, and this is out of the hundreds of thousands that are coming into Australia every year. Last year, only 4 or 5 individuals were prosecuted for visa fraud. Now, these were people that were referred to the Department of Prosecutions to be prosecuted. Whether or not they were prosecuted, I couldn't find out. I doubt all of them would be. There just isn't the ideological stomach for it. They're brown and black people. They've got no social power. What do we want to? But if it's a white guy, whoa, that's different. There's also claims that the government clamps down on, and this is intermittent, it goes every now and again, and the minute they clamp down on it, 5 minutes later, all these organisations are sprang back up again just with a different name. So, and a lot of the departments that are supposed to administer if you like, the honesty of these labour hire firms, ghost colleges, they're also Indians and are quite clearly on the take. Wherever you install an Indian with any sort of power or oversight, they will always employ other Indians and be receiving bribes from Indian businesses. As night follows day, that seems to be, certainly by my estimation, the setup or the run of things. So that rather than prosecute people, what it seems, as far as I can tell, is the government just quietly says, we're closing you down, but we won't prosecute you. So the Indian just shrugs their shoulders, then registers another business the very next day and just continues on unchanged. So really there is no clampdown, until these people are prosecuted and deported and the systems and processes they use to fraudulently bring mass Indians and Chinese into the West or into Australia. Until that's dealt with, then nothing's going to happen. But I don't think the government wants to do it. I think it's like, the illegal boat people coming into the UK. It's what the globalists want. The globalists want this. They may pretend to huff and puff about how terrible it is, but it's what they want. And the amount of people prosecuted is close to nil. So there's a general acceptance of ghost colleges, and there's a show made of closing a few down every now and again. But the reality is, it's what they want, and to say they're supporting it maybe is a little bit too strong. But turning a blind eye and not prepared to stop it is certainly an issue here. And the amount, they could get the amount of prosecutions they could get would be in the hundreds of thousands. But rather than do that, they just quietly do the occasional closing down, or we'll just quietly ask, hey, I think you'd better leave. But the breaking of the terms of the visas are so widespread. Just as an example, not that long ago, we were doing a contract at work with some guys, and they sort of, it was Chinese guy who was a senior player in that. And he came to me and said, look, we'll give you the work and we'll give you more work, but you've got to agree to bring my sister in from China as a skilled migrant. What? And this is just how corrupt these people are generally. They're not there to get work done or to award contracts or anything like that. It's all part of a wider system of corruption and bribery as they see it, because that's their world and that's their perception. And as long as these people are being brought in such numbers, this is how they're going to behave. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.